everyone, today I want to do a quick review on a book I read yesterday, and this is The Girl From Everywhere by Heidi Hellig. It's a YA time travel coming of age story and it's a very sweet read. I just want to say something about the phrase time travel. It's thrown about an awful lot to describe a book that has some sort of travelling through history, time, the future kind of thingy. And I think sometimes it's used incorrectly. It's used to describe this book because they can travel through time via maps that have been drawn at a particular point in history. And that's the only way they can manage to travel. The time travel aspect is not a huge part of the story. I don't think it would change it hugely if they couldn't travel through time, because the story is mainly about Nyx, our main character, coming of age and learning and discovering what she wants to do with her life. Does she want to stay with her father, or does she want to branch out on her own? So it's not a huge time travel book. That's not the main crux of this story. In the same way that St. Mary's Chronicles, time travel is not the main point of the stories. It's just there as a tool. And so when you see time travel describing a book, just take it with a pinch of salt, because it can mean something as simple as that, jumping from one time point to another time point, to travelling all the time throughout time. It's a very flexible description and I don't really like it very much. So, The Girl From Everywhere follows Nyx, a 16-year-old girl who can navigate through time using maps that have been drawn from a particular time period. So if they have a map that's drawn in Hawaii in 1863, then they can use that map to travel aboard their pirate ship, the Temptation, to Hawaii 1863. His father fell in love with a woman from Hawaii in the mid-1800s and wanted to give her everything she could possibly ever want. So left again, he's a navigator himself, to go and make a huge fortune so he could buy her a piece of paradise. Unfortunately, by the time he was able to get back to Hawaii, and it was a few years later, his love had died in childbirth and left the daughter, Nyx, who he stole away from the opium den where she was living and brought her aboard the ship. Turns out she's also a navigator. But he didn't teach her how to navigate through the sea like he does. So she reads the map, she discovers if they're real or not, she works out the path, and then her father does the sailing. He does the hard work, as it were. And his search is for a map that would take him back to a point before his love dies, where he can take her away and keep her safe. Unfortunately, nobody knows if this means that current Nyx will be wiped from the timeline, having never been born, or will her whole life change. Nobody knows this. It's the classic grandfather paradox. If you change something in the past, it changes something in the future, or will it? No one's sure. So Nyx doesn't want to go back to that time and dreads whenever they find a map that will take them to Hawaii. The beginning of this book starts with them arriving in New York after successfully bartering for a couple of tigers, which they're going to sell in New York. They arrive in New York at the beginning of the book for an auction of a map that is guaranteed to take them back to Hawaii when the captain wants to go. It's billed as genuine. He knows this is genuine. It's been auctioned by Christie's. They use the map, however, and it arrives about 30 years too late in 1884. And the crew of the Temptation end up getting mixed up in basically a plot to bring down the Hawaiian monarchy. And it's quite interesting how the story weaves out and how certain side characters have played a pivotal role in bringing the main characters to this point in time. And the time travel twist towards the end is very, very clever. There are plenty of clues along the way. If you don't see them, it's not a problem. But if you do see them, you'll be, oh yeah, I saw that coming. It's very satisfying. Being a YA book, it's actually quite a gentle YA book. There's a couple of innuendos in it. The language is very, very clean. The violence is minimal, and it's very clever. So I would say quite a young teenager could read this book and pretty much enjoy it without anybody fearing about what they're going to encounter. It's billed as a love interest, but it's more about Nyx coming to experience love and understanding that there are choices she has out there. Obviously, she has her best mate on the ship, Cash, who's quite a decent guy. He comes from a mythological place, based on the story of 1001 Arabian Nights. Yeah, something else they can do. If the map maker believes in what they've drawn, they can navigate to that place, which is very cool. So all the mythological stuff comes into play here, like fire herrings from Scandinavia beliefs, which are very handy for keeping the lanterns lit, and the bottomless bag from Welsh mythology, where you can fill it out with whatever you want, and it never fills up unless a person steps inside, and that's pretty cool. So there's also little things like that that were woven into the story. But part of the story is Nyx discovering, actually, do I care for my best friend more than I think I care for him, or not? And then also meeting a very charming young man called Blake in Hawaii, who ends up sort of flirting with her, and she ends up flirting back with him, and she's not sure what's going on or where this is leading to. And I quite like that. There's no love, like instant love in it. There's no romance that we've come to expect from YA books. It's more a gentle awakening of feelings, and I really enjoyed that. It was quite a nice change. The story isn't about love in the traditional YA sense. It's about dealing with what love can do to a person, and when you've lost love, how that can change you and the obsessions that you have. So it was quite nice to read a love story told from a very different point of view, as it were. There is a mention of opium addiction in this. We have the opium dens because obviously that was around at that time point. So there's a little bit of that going on, but it's never glorified. So no fear that if a teenager get their hand this book, they're not suddenly going to want to go to an opium den or that. There's none of that. It's very much all frowned upon, and it's about the person being free from the addiction. It's quite nice. I also like the tie-in of the mythology, which I'm not going to spoil because that will ruin the end of the book for you, but the use of mythology in this book is very, very clever, and I like the way that it's naturally woven through the story. And so here we are. What might interest some people is the multiculturalism of the main crew. Nyx herself is half Chinese, which, I didn't bat an eyelid. I still enjoyed her character. Not a problem to me, and it shouldn't be a problem to anybody else out there. Maybe cut all that. Her best friend is from, obviously, an Arabian type land. So that's kind of cool. One of her crewmates is Bee, who comes from North Africa. She's from a small tribe, and she was actually married to her wife, who now haunts her in sort of spiritual form. Her wife gets blamed for anything that Bee does wrong, and it's really tastefully done. I quite enjoyed it, actually. So yes, if you want a bit of multiculturalism and different ethnicities in your storytelling, then you probably ought to pick up The Girl from Everywhere, because it pretty much covers it. The main 2/3 of the book is set in Hawaii in 1884. So obviously we have some of the Hawaiian culture going on, with the Victorian influx coming in from Britain, and obviously America's influence, and how the clashes are going on and how that's affecting the landscape and the culture of the people there. And, there's gentle nods to that. It's not thrust down your throat, but there are nods to the fact that had it not been for the arrival of the white man, Hawaii would still have its culture, which is something to really think about. We did really screw up an awful lot of places in the world by expanding. And that's a terrible burden that we have to bear. And we can only try and make it better. So yeah, ramblings aside. So The Girl from Everywhere, have you read it? What did you think of it? Please let me know in the comments down below, or link me to your review videos. You can find all my social media links in the description box down below. I am on Twitter, Goodreads and Instagram. So please follow me there. It'd be nice to make a few new contacts and share our book love across the board. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading. Bye.